All right, welcome back, guys. So hopefully you watched the previous video, factoring by grouping. If you have not done that yet, please stop this video right now. Go back and watch it. This video is not going to make sense if you do not know how to factor by grouping. So that would be the link that we gave you first, and then this link will be underneath it on the student checklist that we sent out this week. Okay, so please go watch the first video. Now, if you have already watched that, hopefully you're watching these even before you touch Khan Academy, and if not, you can always go and push the try again button if you didn't like your scores and now you're like, oh, now I know how to do it, okay? So this is the method, and this is what Khan Academy does. So Khan Academy, we're not saying don't watch it. We're saying watch this and that. This will be a method that maybe can help you guys to understand how to factor. And a little different way to visualize it. So last week we talked about factoring when we have a leading coefficient of 1. So we learned some special strategies that we can figure out whenever our leading coefficient is 1. We also saw that sometimes we have to take a GCF out and then we'll find a polynomial with a leading coefficient of 1. Well, this time we're going to factor trinomials, so 3 terms, factor trinomials without a leading coefficient of 1. So we're going to learn a new strategy for that. Okay, so let's dive into this. All right, so here is our notes page. So if you are on your phone or you're on a computer and you know how to screenshot, this might be something good for you to remember, or you can always just restart the video and come back to it. Okay, so we're gonna call this the X method. It's also been called rooftop, it's called AC method. All means the same thing, just some people write it out differently. Okay, so really the steps are all the same, but we're gonna give you kind of a visual piece to be able to do these problems. Okay, so the first step is we're gonna multiply A and C. So remember, we're looking at trinomials, so we're looking at quadratics, and our quadratics are in the function of ax squared plus bx plus c. So we're gonna take that leading coefficient, that A, and we're gonna multiply it by the C. And remember, the sign in front of a number belongs to a number. So you have to keep that in mind. Okay, so we're gonna take the A and C, we're gonna multiply them and put them in the top of our X, as you see down here on the bottom. Okay, then step 2 says we're gonna place the B. So we're gonna take the coefficient of the X term, coefficient of the linear term, and we're gonna put that in the bottom of our X. Okay, so then just like we did when we did our shortcut way last week, we are gonna find 2 numbers that multiply to be A and C, but add to be B, okay? And then we're gonna rewrite the polynomial and factor by grouping. So let's see what this looks like. Okay, so 2x squared plus 11x plus 15. So first, last week we saw we need to decide, okay, the coefficients, the leading coefficient's not 1. So wonder, can I factor out that 2? Can I get rid of that? Is there a common factor of 2? No. 2 does not go evenly into 11 nor 15. So we have to have a different way to do these ones. And that's what we're doing with the X method, okay? So first things first, we're gonna draw our X. Okay, and the top of our X, we're gonna multiply A and C. So 2 times 15, and they're both positive. So it's just gonna be positive 2 times positive 15, so that gives me 30, and the positive 30 in the top of my X. And then I'm gonna take that B term, that positive 11, and I'm gonna put that in the bottom part of my X. Okay, so now my goal is I'm gonna find what factors of 30, so A times C, what factors of 30 can add to give me 11. And I know I'm adding because it's a positive 30. Because it was a positive 30, I know I'm gonna add. So let's break apart 30. Let's look at all the factors of 30 real fast. So we have 30 can break apart and with 1 times 30, 2 times 15, 3 times 10, 4 go evenly? Nope, but 5 and 6. Okay, so since it's a positive 30, since A and C were both positive, so it became a positive 30, then we know we're gonna find the ones that add to give us a positive 11, because that B was positive 11. Okay, so that would be our 5 and 6. So 5 plus 6 is positive 11. So then that is where we're gonna put our 5 and our 6. Okay, so what this little X does for us is it gives us our 2 middle pieces. So we learned in the last video that we can use the grouping method when we have 4 or more terms. Okay, so now we're gonna break this apart into 4 terms so that we can group it and get to our final factors. Okay, so we're gonna leave that first term alone, the 2x squared, and we're just gonna rewrite it. 2x squared, kind of bad too, let's start that over. There we go, 2x squared. But we're gonna break apart that 11x. That's what we just found, is how we could break it up. So we're gonna have plus 5x plus 6x. And these terms right here came from over here, the 5 and the 6. Because if we were to combine those again, that 5x plus 6x would get us back to that 11x right there. So we didn't do anything wrong. It's just a strategy to get the answer. So technically, we're just breaking it apart. Okay, and then the 15 doesn't change, we just drop it down. Okay, now we have 4 terms, so now we can use the grouping strategy that we learned in the last video. So again, we're gonna group the first 2 and the last 2. Okay, so in the first one, 2 and 5 are my coefficients. Those don't have a GCF. However, both the first term and the second term of that, x squared and x, they both have an x. So that means I can factor out an x. So I'm gonna take out an x, and then I'm gonna decide what's left inside my parentheses. Well, x times 2x would give me 2x squared. And then x times 5, positive 5, would give me that plus 5x. Close my parentheses. Then I want to decide, does 6 and 15 have a GCF? They do, 3. So I'm going to take out that, drop down that plus and a 3. And they don't both have x's, so we can't take out an x. Okay, so then we're going to see what's left. 3 times what would give me 6x? 2x. Okay, and then 3 times what would give me 15? Positive 5. And that was the goal. If you remember from the last video, the goal was that we had a common binomial. We wanted there to be a common binomial. So this is our common binomial. So we're going to drop that down one time. 2x plus 5. And then we're going to bring those other pieces, that x plus 3 down, and it's going to be the second factor, x plus 3. So if we were to take this and we were to double distribute or FOIL or shirts and pants this back, we would get all the way back to this original problem. Okay, so that is how you factor. That is how you factor with the X method, rooftop, AC, whatever you want to call it. So we're going to say X method. That's how you factor with the X method. So when your coefficient is not 1. Okay, so let's practice again. All right, so again, we're working with that X method. Okay, so we're going to do first things first. We're going to draw our X. Okay, then we want to multiply. We're going to multiply A times C. So A is that leading coefficient. So 6 times, that's a positive 7 is our C. And so 6 times 7 is a positive 42. Okay, positive 42. All right, and then we are going to bring that B, that 23, that positive 23, and put it in the bottom of our X. So remember, the top of our X is our A times C, bottom of the X is our B. So now our goal is to find the two numbers that multiply to be positive 42, and because it's a positive, they're also going to add to be 23. Okay, so let's break apart. Let's look at our multiples of 42. Let's break that apart. So 42, we have 1 and 42, 2 and 21, 3 and 14, and 6 and 7. Remember, if you struggle with finding your factors or to be able to see what multiplies, then just take your calculator. Go 42 divided by 2. Oh, that's 21. 42 divided by 3. Oh, that's 14. 42 divided by 4. Oh, that's a decimal. Okay, and so then you can find it until your numbers start either repeating or you get consecutive numbers like 6 and 7. Okay, so if some of you are still kind of confused about where we're getting those numbers, it's your multiplication table. Okay? All right, so we found our numbers that multiply to be 42, and we want to see what adds, because it's a positive 42, because that's positive 7 times positive 6 is positive 42. So it's going to add to give us 23. So hopefully your brain goes straight to 2 and 21. Those are going to add to give us 23. Okay, and then because that 23 is positive, because it's a positive 23, you can see it there or there. Because it's a positive 23, then that means that they are both going to be positive numbers. So we have positive, fill in our x, positive 2, and positive 21. Okay, so now we're going to rewrite our original problem, and we're going to break apart that middle term, that 23. Okay, so we're going to rewrite it. We're going to drop the first term just like we see it, 6x squared. But now we're going to go over to our x, that middle part of our x, and we're going to write plus 2x plus 21x, drop that plus 7. Okay, so again, this 2 and 21, because it's positive 2x plus 21x, that is okay to do because where we get that is right here. We just broke it apart, okay? But we had to have specific numbers to break it apart, and that's what we figured out using our x method and our multiples, okay? All right, so once we have 4 terms, like we learned in the last video, we can use our grouping method. So I'm gonna group the first 2 terms and the last 2 terms. Okay, so now I need to find my GCF of the first group and the last group. Okay, so the first group, 6x squared plus 2x. Okay, so 6 and 2, the GCF of 6 and 2 is 2. And then both those have an x, so I can take out at least 1. Okay, that's a bad parenthesis. A little better. Okay, so then now I'm gonna remember, I'm gonna kind of backwards distribute. Okay, so 2x times what gives me 6x squared? 2x times 3x would give me 6x squared. Then 2x times what gives me 2x? Well, 2 times 1 gives me 2, and there's already an x, so we actually do have to write a plus 1 right there. Okay, that little placeholder, that plus 1. Okay, so make sure that you don't forget to write 1s whenever they're by themselves. Okay, so 3x plus 1. Now look at my last group. So the GCF of 21 and 7. So hopefully that pops in the top of your head that 21 and 7 both share 7. Okay, and I'm gonna open up my parenthesis. Then 7 times what gives me 21x? Well, that's 3x. And then 7 times what gives me 7? Oh, well, anything times 1 should be itself. So, and that's what we wanted, okay? Because we should be able to look at the end that we have common binomials. So once we have that common binomial, we're gonna drop that down 1 time, 3x plus 1. And then I'm gonna take my other 2 pieces, my GCFs, and put them together in their own binomial, 2x plus 7. And that is the factored form. That is the factored form of 6x squared plus 23x plus 7. So if you were to multiply that back out, you were to distribute or shirts and pants, then you would get back to 6x squared plus 23x plus 7. If you're still kind of confused, I challenge you to try that. Pause this video, get a sheet of paper, write this out, and go ahead and shirts and pants it, foil it out, and see if you get back to 6x squared plus 23x plus 7, because you will. Okay? All right, so let's look at another example. Okay, so hopefully this time you're like, oh, there's something different. This time we have some negatives or some minuses in here. Okay, so let's see how that changes things up. So first things first, write your x. Okay, so now we have to pay attention to the sign in front of a number belongs to a number. So we're going to multiply a times c. So this time that is 4 times negative 6. Well, 4 times negative 6 gives me a negative 24. okay? And then I'm gonna bring that b over, and this time the b is -5. So don't lose those signs, okay? And all that negative is really gonna tell us is we're still gonna find the two numbers that multiply to be 24, but add to be 5. But because it's negative, that's when you multiply to get a negative, it's one's gotta be positive and one's gonna have to be negative. So it's really like we're subtracting, okay? So if that helps you, we're gonna find two numbers that subtract because of that sign, that subtract give us 5, okay? So let's break apart 24. Let's look at our multiples of 24. So we have 24. We can go 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 4 and 6. Okay, so we have our multiples of 24. And because it's negative, then that means we're going to figure out which set of those multiples, if we subtracted them, would get me back to 5. Well, hopefully you automatically see it that it's going to be 3 and 8. So then we're going to look at that. We're going to look at that sign in front of our b term, and that -5 or that -5 is going to tell us that the bigger number has to be negative. So that sign is going to tell us the sign of the bigger number. Okay, so then it's going to be -8 and a +3. Because if you multiply +3 times -8 would get us to our -24. And if you added them, it would give us our -5 that we needed. Okay, so now I'm going to move those over into my x. And now I'm going to rewrite my original problem. So I have 4 terms and can now use the grouping method. Okay, so 4x squared plus 3x minus 8x minus 6. Okay, so I'm bringing these down and breaking them apart. Okay, so now I'm going to group those. First two, last two. Okay, so 4x squared plus 3x. Well, I need to take out one of those x's. 4 and 3 don't have a GCF, so the only common factor in that is the 1x. Okay, so then x times what gives me 4x squared? So it'd be 4x. And then x times what gives me 3x? Well, I already have the x, but I don't have that plus 3. Then I'm going to drop that minus and find the GCF of the last two terms, the last group. So the GCF of 8 and 6 would be 2. Hopefully when you see even numbers, you think of 2. Okay, so we have a GCF of 2. I'm going to open up my parenthesis. Then 2 times what would get me to 4 or to 8x would be 4x. Then -2 times what would get me to a -6. So be careful on those signs in that last one. -2 times +3, which you should automatically hope that's it and check that that's what it is, because we had 4x plus 3 here. We needed to have 4x plus 3 right here. Okay, so now we have a common binomial, so we're going to drop that down one time. 4x plus 3. And then I'm going to bring the other two pieces, my other two the GCFs that I factored out, and I'm going to drop them down in their own binomial, and that will be the other factor. And so that is the factored form of 4x squared minus 5x minus 6. Okay. All right. Okay, I'm sure when this one popped up, you're kind of like, whoa, okay, those are big numbers, right? Okay, so sometimes you're gonna have some problems that are gonna have a common factor. So you always wanna consider first things first. Do my coefficients have a GCF? Because if they do, it's gonna simplify everything. Because if we started doing our X method with the numbers as big as they are in this problem, and normally your GCFs won't be this big, but I wanted to show you one that's big just in case, so that you can't say we didn't show you a hard one. Okay, so if I were to multiply A and C, that would be 1,600. I do not want to list the multiples of 1,600. I don't think you do either. So that's why we want to make sure that we take out, or we factor out any GCFs before we even start using our X method. So if we look at those coefficients, 16, 60, and 100, they all have a common factor of 4. 4 goes evenly into all of those, so let's factor out a 4. So if I factored a 4 out of that, I would have 4 times 4x squared would give me 16x squared. 4 times positive 15 would 15x would give me 60x. Then 4 times negative 25 would give me negative 100. Okay? So now that we have that inside part, that's a little nicer to mess with. That's a little nicer to do our x method with. Okay? So we're gonna now kind of ignore that 4 for a second. We're just gonna ignore this guy, but he doesn't go away. Okay? So don't just get rid of him, but just hold off for a second. So let's just look at this part right here and do our x method. Okay, so I'm going to draw my x. My a and my c is going to be 4 and negative 25. So 4 times negative 25 is negative 100. And then my c is 15, positive 15. I mean my b, I'm sorry, my b is positive 15. Okay, so now I need to find two numbers that multiply to be negative 100 and add to be 15. And remember, because that's negative 100, it's almost like it's going to subtract because one's got to be positive and one's going to be negative. Okay, so let's break apart 100. Okay, so we have 1 and 100, 2 and 50, 4 and 25, 5 and 20. Oh, 5 and 20. So remember, because that's a negative 100, one would have to be negative and one would have to be positive. So that means it's like we're subtracting to get to this b term, to the 15. So that's going to be 5 and 20. 20 minus 5 is 15. So then I'm going to look at the sign of my b term. It's a positive 15, so that means the 20 would have to be the positive because it's the bigger number, and the 5 would be the negative. So now I'm going to move those terms over into my x, negative 5 and positive 20. And then I'm going to rewrite that middle polynomial, and I'm going to change that 15x and make it negative 5x plus 20x. So we're going to have 4x squared minus 5x plus 20x minus 25. Okay, now that I have 4 terms, I'm ready to group it. So I'm going to group the first two and the last two, and then find their GCF. So 4x squared minus 5x, the GCF of the first group. Well, 4 and 5 don't have a GCF, but both of those terms have an x, so we're going to take out an x. And then x times 4x would give us 4x squared. And then x times negative 5 would give us negative 5x. Then I'm going to drop that plus, and I'm going to figure out the GCF of the second two terms, or the last group. So 20x minus 25. So the GCF of 20 and 25 is 5. And then I want to see what's left on the inside, and I'm going to hope it's going to be 4x minus 5, but let's make sure. So 5 times what gives me 20x? Well, 4x. And then 5 times what gives me positive 5 times what gives me negative 25. Remember, watch those signs on the last one. So positive 5 times negative 5 would give me negative 25. And that's what I wanted. Now I have a common binomial, and I'm going to drop that down one time. 4x minus 5. And then I'm going to take those GCFs and I'm going to put them in their own factor, they're going to be their own binomial. So x plus 5. Okay? But here's the catch. You can't just stop it there. Let's run it. Okay? You can't just stop it there. Okay? So we actually have that 4, that multiple of 4 up at the top. So once we get to our factored form of this inside polynomial, then we have to bring that 4 back down. So this 4 right here, we need to bring him back down here. Okay, so bring him back down. So your final answer would have been 4 times 4x minus 5 times x plus 5. Okay, so just bring that 4 down at the end. Okay, so hopefully that helps to clarify some things for this week. You still need to watch your Khan Academy videos and do your assignments on there, but these videos are to help you in your first section today. These are really important concepts that you guys understand. Okay, so before you go to Algebra 2, you need to know how to factor. Okay, so make sure that you're watching these videos, you're doing your practices, and then tune in with your teacher this week for their live tutoring time so that you can get to practice other problems. You can see them talk about it because we have some awesome Algebra 1 teachers that probably explain it way better than me. Okay, so make sure you tune in with your teachers in that you email, you remind, you message them, whatever it is, whenever you have questions. We are here for you guys, and we will give you guys some more reinforcement on those other topics in tutoring this week. So see you later.